Hey everyone, happy Friday and welcome to the Wilder Ride. Before we start the show, wanted to remind everybody that we do have a way of financially supporting what we're doing, and that is via our Patreon page at patreon.com/The Wilder Ride. And so it goes without saying, we owe some people a thank you. Let's start off with Tara Bain, who has been with us from the very beginning, our very first patron, a stalwart supporter of the Wilder Ride. Thank you, Tara. We have 2 executive producers we need to give top billing to next. That includes Wendy Muller, who joined us last season and has been a stalwart supporter. Thank you, Wendy, for all of your support and your activity in the listeners group. And to Ross Seymour, a golden ticket subscriber. You get executive producer credit as well. Ben Forty Ford, from across the pond, a member of the podcast team of 60 Minutes With, a podcast everyone should be subscribing and listening to. Doug Greenberg, one of the hosts of the Rocky Minute, also a podcast you guys should be subscribing to. Doug, thank you so much. Off the Bounce, the basketball podcast. Thanks, Coach Peacock. We appreciate your support. A big shout out to Jeff Lieboff, one of the hosts of Radio Labyrinth, a podcast you guys should be following. Keep in mind, though, not safe for work. Also, a big thank you to Professor Robert E.G. Black, a podcaster himself, part of the Movies by Minutes family. He did the show Dave Made a Minute and Michael Myers Minute, also in the midst of The Room Minute. Yours truly, along with Walt, were both on Dave Made a Minute, and I was on the Michael Myers Minute. So thank you, Robert, for being a supporter. Melissa Moody, we appreciate your support being out there, and Rob Smithers. You guys are fantastic. It takes a lot to put on a show like this. If you'd like to be a supporter, please join our Patreon group. It starts as little as $1 a month. So let's get to it. Before we waste any more of your time, let's welcome to the stage Gene Wilder.
Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! Alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, happy Friday. Welcome back to The Wilder Ride, a podcast that celebrates the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. And for season 2, we are diving into Blazing Saddles 1. They said you was hung and they was right, minute at a time. I'm your host, I'm Alan Sanders.
I am your co-host, Walt Murray.
And it is a great pleasure of ours to bring to the podcast a person that, if you're a fan of the Indiana Jones Minute or maybe some other podcasts, you might have heard this individual. We're so happy to have him for the very first time, Gordy Adams. Gordy, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it. This is a dream come true. I have many dreams, but this is one of them.
We're so happy we could set a bar so low for you.
Your dream was to come fix this mess?
I wanted to be on the Young Frankenstein Minute, but I missed that bus. So I was hoping, well, if they do Blazing Saddles, I gotta figure a way to wedge myself in there. And hey, luckily somebody fell out, and here I am on just ready to roll.
Well, every once in a while, I really like to get Alan's goat. And this morning, I sent him a text and said, "Hey, I was just watching Young Frankenstein, and there are a couple things we missed, so we got a couple episodes we got to re-record." So.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
My not safe for podcast response was. You.
Yeah, it was barely safe for texting.
Yeah, I almost got my AT&T provider like, "Whoa, hey, watch what you're sending there."
Fella.
But no, we're so happy that you are here, that you stumbled across our podcast and listened to the Young Frankenstein, and I'm glad we're able to get you in here for Blazing Saddles. One of the things we do when we first bring a new guest on is kind of just set the table on who you are and some of your background. And where does Blazing Saddles fall for you? So let me start off with that question. How familiar are you with this movie?
Well, I saw this film in 1974 at the drive-in. My parents took me to the drive-in. I was 8. So you can just imagine how much of an impact that had on me.
I can only imagine, because I know what impact it had on me when I was, I think, 9 or 10 or 11 when I saw it on TV. And I saw the TV version.
Right. Yeah, I saw the original version. And I do have to give my parents credit, because it does sound a little bit like child neglect or something like that. My mom took me to see Jaws in 75. I was 9 to see Jaws. Are you kidding? Anyway, they were super progressive in the 70s for me. I knew who Martin Luther King and Gandhi were at a very, very young age. And I was taught to, it sounds cliche, but not to see color. But I just didn't. I just had friends, and so I didn't really know about the despair and the differences between people by just how they looked. So a lot of the things about what was happening in this movie just went over my head, not just only because I was young, but because I didn't really understand that the racism side of it was, part of the story. And you guys have been talking about that it was definitely a response to the racism that was going on. But as a young kid, I didn't notice it. But as an adult, of course, it's super clear of what kind of point Mel Brooks was trying to make. So,
well, this is something we've chatted about amongst ourselves, and it has been in many episodes. It reminds me a lot the style of storytelling here in this film. Only in the way of like the Muppet Show. When I was a kid, there were jokes that kids got, but then there was some other humor in there that only somebody who had lived a little longer would understand. And that's why I think the Muppet Show was so popular in the 70s. The parents could watch it and they would catch some relevant cultural joke or inside humor. And the kids would get the humor of being the little, the puppets and the dolls. I think Blazing Saddles does that. And a lot of our guests have commented that they laughed a lot when they were younger at some of the easier things to digest. Right. Then all of a sudden, as an adult, they go back and go, oh my gosh, I missed that, or I missed that. And that's why I think it's got that rewatchability.
Right. Yeah. Like Mongo, when you're a kid, he's just a goofy guy. But as an adult, you go, he was kind of philosophical. He's actually on the Wikipedia, he's described as dim-witted but philosophical. And it's like, oh, yeah, I get that now.
Oh, it's fantastic. And ironically, Walt, we just got done with our previous guest talking about the Mongo Minutes and the irony of here's this big goofball all of a sudden has this wonderfully, philosophical moment about himself and where he falls in the world.
And I knew who he was because I had his football card. Like I looked forward to seeing him as he's going to act? Interesting.
Well, and he is one of those in that long line of people who attempted to make the transition from sports to acting. Some of them have done what he's done and been able to do it successfully. Some of them have been colossal disasters, and and both of them are kind of fun to watch.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right on that one for sure.
Well, when you saw Alex Karras in this role and then as an actor later, what did you think of him making that transition? Did you kind of see it as something that was natural, or did you kind of look at it and say, that's kind of a strange move for Alex Karras?
Well, like I said, I was fairly young, so I knew of him as a football player. But this role is so specific, and it plays to his size and his what other people think athletes are like. So it worked for me. But he really didn't do much after this, did he?
Oh yeah, he did. Most prominently, he did a show called Webster, where he played the adoptive father of a young black kid. And,
right, yeah, I remember it, right.
Yeah, so he was fairly successul as an actor.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, I guess I didn't follow him from there.
Yeah, that show probably had a 6 or 7 year run, I believe. So
it was really successful as a family kind of show.
Yeah, and
right.
One of my friends who has passed, his sister worked on the show. I'm going to say Home Improvement. I can't remember if that Tim Allen.
It's a Home Improvement.
Home Improvement.
That's right. Yeah.
And he was just saying that if you have a successful sitcom that goes more than about 3 or 4 years, you don't ever have to work again. You have now made enough money, and now it's in syndication. You literally will never have to work again. And so he, at least from that, he could check that box that he was successful enough that he made a very, very good living as an actor.
We one of the things we wrestle with even having picked this movie is because we live in a very, very hyper politically correct culture. I think it's not just in the U.S., it's worldwide. I have friends in the U.K., I've got friends in Germany, and we all can kind of coalesce around this idea that at some point you can kill anything funny if you push too far. And we're at a point where Mel Brooks himself even had an article earlier in 2019 that said, PC is the death of comedy. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think nowadays it's understood that if you're going to push those buttons, you're going to get a reaction. Back then, I put it into context also, because this movie at the time was trying to make a point, and the villains were laughable if you were woke, as they say now. Back then,
we've
like
just
whenever
dated the cast.
Yes,
right. whenever I heard that word, the main, I mean, there's also the Kansas City.
Yeah.
But the anytime you hear the word that people have an incredibly hard time with
the
nowadays,
N-word.
Right. I don't even like saying that just because then you automatically say it in your head, which we're already doing. It seemed like the reason it was being said, there's two instances, and actually this minute is, dare I say it, appropriate because Charlie says it. But when the bad guy or when the idiots say it, it's just reinforcing that they're idiots.
Right.
So, and they're just uneducated cowboys. And so it's like when I was a kid, I heard that and I didn't go, hey, I want to, that just proves that the more uneducated you are, you'll use that word. I had friends who would say that and their parents would say that. And I hated to say I looked down upon them because I don't want to be judgmental, but they just weren't as, enlightened as my parents were. And I was lucky to have that.
Well, I think some people, because of the choices that they make, earn being looked down on. And
right.
I think when you look at this movie, that is one of the things that you have to kind of accept here is that they are setting up Lyle and Taggart and those other guys and their crew as people who should be looked down on because they are ignorant and they are putting people down and trying to keep people under their thumb simply because of the color of their skin. And the point of this movie, and I think that something that we should accept, that we should glean out of this movie is those people should be looked down on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's true. That's for sure true. Well, I remember early on when I was very young, I played soccer, and we used to travel. I'm in St. Helena, I grew up in Napa Valley, and we went to Vallejo, which is a little bit south, and it's sort of an urban area. It was an urban area. And there was this one section that we drove past called the Crest, and it had a high population of African Americans. And driving through there to a game, one of the other kids said, "Hey, that's Little Africa." That's what they called that area. And I didn't really think anything about it. And then when I drove past there with my family to go Christmas shopping in San Francisco, I said, "Little Africa." And my mom, she looked at me and said, "Where'd you hear that?" And she corrected me. She said, "No, this is why that's not a good thing to say." And so therefore it's like, oh, that does make sense. Thanks, Mom. And then I understood once again, racism is taught, not it's taught and learned. It's not obvious. So
yeah. And
anyway.
I think that there's a comfort level that we all have with certain cultures and certain things but it doesn't mean we look down on other cultures necessarily. But we have a comfort level. But when you start looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, everybody who looks like me is better than everybody else.
Well, that'd be a problem.
That's a problem.
Right.
That's a huge
And I think
problem.
that's the theme of this movie is that, that everybody potentially has good things to bring to the table. And the person that you look up to in this movie the most is Bart. And look at all the stuff that he overcomes and look at how he impacts all the people around him. Everybody who comes in contact with Bart is a better person for coming in contact with Bart.
And his stoicism is exemplary of why he's such a great character. He's just very stoic. He gets down about it at times, but he's just like, okay, no, I'm better than that.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the great messages of this movie is that he doesn't look at this and let it beat him. He looks at it and he comes out the same guy at the end that he was at the beginning.
Yeah.
That's a great theme.
I've said this before, and I enjoy the idea that this is also him earning everything as well. He doesn't stand on a soapbox and say, "You owe me this because it's just not right to treat me badly." He actually does the good things. He is the good guy. He defeats the bad guys. He helps the town. He puts himself in danger and earns the respect. And I love that message of just, you go out there and you treat people well. That's all you have to do in life. You can't control how other people treat you, but you can control how you treat others.
No matter how absurd the story is.
Right,
Right.
absolutely. Well, it sounds like we're already ready to dive in. So let me go ahead and set the table then for this Friday. We love having a brand new guest. We're going to keep Gordy in for a sleepover. We're going to have him over and bring him back on Monday. But for today, we're dealing with minute 65, and we're going to continue with the scene. We saw Charlie walking toward the foreground and heading toward a barrel. So we're going to see Charlie actually begin to drink some water. And we're going to end with a crowd of railroad workers all running to greet Sheriff Bart. So let's go ahead and dive in right away, because I wanted to not miss this point too far away from what you said, Gordy, about the use of the N-word. Because when some people say it in this movie, it's definitely despicable and disparaging. But then we've got Charlie here who's about to say it. And it reminds me that in this one very short minute, we can see it's still all about context. You can't just hear a word and immediately assume the worst. You have to let the story play out and understand how the words are being used. And in this case, it's not being used necessarily in a derogatory way. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should allow this among, black people being able to say whatever they want to each other, but it does show the word itself only gets power from how people negatively use it. It's just a word by itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This is one of my favorite. I'm actually, at first I was like, oh, this scene is kind of not a scene that I would remember clearly. But then as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, this is actually one of my favorite scenes. And the reason is I really like the natural acting that goes on from Charlie and all the other workers. There's like everybody else is a bit of a caricature, but these guys are like guys you might know. Guys that you could actually hang out with and talk with. And I just love that it's the subtleness. There's a subtleness of the way they play off each other. I think it's really well done.
Well, it's interesting that Gordy brings that up, but maybe that's deserves a little more conversation. When we think about it, the actors that tend to be the most natural are all the good guys.
Yeah, very true.
I mean, Jim comes across very natural. Yes, he's the Waco kid, but just because he's a very fast gunfighter, he's very natural, very likable. We instantly like these two guys when they meet each other. Bart stays natural. The railroad workers are all very natural. It's the caricatures are all the bad people.
That's right. That's right. And you find yourself liking the people who Bart likes because you like Bart so much.
Or let me do this. I'll do even one different. Or actually, not even one different. I'm going to add to this to show how much maybe this is one of the underlying messages we should be paying attention to. Mungo starts off as a caricature, but ends up changing sides and shows his first philosophical moment only after being beat by Bart. Lily von Stupp, she's a very two-dimensional seductress, turns around and realizes there's so much more to Bart. I like being with Bart more than I like being with Hedley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true.
That's very true. Yeah.
Wow, so they become real people after being involved with Sheriff Bart. Whether this is there intentionally from the writers or not, watching this and understanding literature and watching things from a more critical perspective, it's hard not to draw the conclusion that Bart makes everybody real, whereas racism or the idea that I'm better than you for something superficial as color is nothing more than this two-dimensional, caricature world that all the other characters are possessing.
Well, if you think about it, and if you look, Jim was done. He was a washed-up drunk. His life is basically over. He has no direction, no passion, no nothing left. Lily von Stupp, her song is I'm tired. She's done. She has no real emotion left. And both of them, as they meet him, and even for Mongo's now just kind of a pit bull they've got chained up in camp. And now they all have purpose and meaning, and there's a very redemptive quality to Bart here.
I love it. I love the notion that he has this effect on everyone around him.
Yeah, and even
do you think that was the intent?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Whether it was a and we won't know. We've been reaching out to Mel Brooks. We want.
No, he's not.
Please,
not
Mel. No, please call me back.
This would be one of those questions I would ask. Was that something you consciously thought about in terms of character development, or did it just happen because underneath you were trying to tell that story that stop judging people by color, start judging people by action? It could very well be that it just sort of happened.
Yeah, I believe that's probably close.
Because, I mean, all these people are slowly won over, and as they're won over, they become better people. They become, not only the good guys, and they're teaming with the good guys, they tend to have more to their story. So that's a great way of looking at it. Well, why did it take us 65 minutes before we figured this one out?
Because we're not very smart.
That's what. Yeah, Gordy, there you go. You said you had.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably me. It's just it's okay.
That's right.
I'm the one who brought this. Yeah, that's
You
fine.
said it was your dream to come in here, and we thought to help pick the show up, and there you've done it.
That's right.
I was trying to. I mean, how many shows like this just go past everything and just go for the funny? Where it's like, let's get deep. Let's try to figure this out. Let's get Mongo and philosophical about this.
Let's get Mongo. Mongo and philosophical.
All right. Well, I love doing this, pointing out just every now and then continuity errors. I was complimenting before we even started rolling the shot that they've still got the railroad workers behind Charlie. We saw them working on the wagon, loading. The last minute they were loading these railroad ties. There were 3 stacked up, and they were loading. Now we cut to the angle of Charlie drinking the water, and we actually see there's 1 high, and they're taking 1 off. So obviously Mel Brooks was just saying, okay, for background action, load and then unload, load and then unload, and it didn't quite match in this moment.
No,
but it is cool
really.
that they're still in the background doing the actual loading or unloading of these railroad ties.
Well, and now they're actually loading the rails. They're unloading the rails.
Is that rails, you think, or
Yeah,
ties?
those are rails. Earlier it was ties. Now they're doing rails.
Or is it just the way it looks?
No, because watch, they've got it hooked. You can actually see where it's hooked when they walk by. See, they've actually got it hooked into the top
But
of
that
the
looked
rail
like the
there.
same kind of tool they were using to load
It
in the
is.
last
It's the
minute.
same hook. I don't know what you call that hook.
Okay.
But I went to reference.com, which I'm glad I know that reference.com exists. The rails are 130 pounds per yard, which works out to 43.33 pounds per foot. So for each foot of rail, it's 43.3 pounds. So
Wow.
think about how heavy those are. I'm guessing those are 8 or 10 foot long links. Those are some really heavy rails, and they're not easy to carry. So I'm sure those hooks had to, number one, they were pretty sturdy, but that had to take a lot of the wear and tear as you're lifting those things.
We talked
The tool,
about,
the tool
Yeah.
to use it, sure.
well, not that, just also the backbreaking work. That was one of our earlier
Yeah.
episodes talking about being on the railroad.
Combined, yeah.
And I noticed these guys are not lifting with their legs; they're lifting with their backs.
They missed the safety meeting.
They did. OSHA is going to be pissed.
Yeah, where's OSHA when you need them? They might have had a couple of other more pressing things in this camp versus how they were lifting railroad
There's a lot
ties
here.
or rails.
There's a lot here.
Let's get back to this then. And Gordy, you brought this up about the naturalism. Charlie, I love this when he looks and sees Bart approaching, and I love it's a long shot. So you don't necessarily make out Bart's features, but I think it does this on purpose from a filmmaking perspective, that as he's coming closer on horseback, he's like, this can't be real. This has to be a dream. And I love how he takes the drinking water, splashes himself as if like, wake up, this is a dream.
This is a mirage.
Yeah, that's that cliche of like waking yourself up with water is perfect. Damn.
Yeah.
So, have you ever in your life seen somebody that you thought was dead, and that is the calmness you would have in your response to seeing them come in?
You know, I was
afar?
thinking about this when I was preparing for this minute, that I actually lost 2 of my best friends in 18 months. And
Oh, wow.
one of them from a heart attack, and then right behind that, one of my friends got cancer and died. And I was just kind of thinking, because that's what these guys think. They think that he got hung and that he's dead.
Yeah.
And they even make that statement with a great
hanged,
joke that we'll
but
talk
yeah.
about in a minute. Yeah, hanged.
And they were right.
Yeah, and they thought that he was dead. And so I can only imagine the shock that I would feel if, one of my buddies came riding up all of a sudden. Like, it would be total disbelief. Total disbelief.
Yeah.
But you know what? And this may be somewhat of a cultural difference too. I had no problem buying just the the way Charlie responded, just the damn, and he's going over
Get
there.
down off that horse.
Yeah. So I don't know that he would have, passed out or something. I love his reaction. To me, it feels like everything that I heard was wrong, and I'm so happy that you're still alive.
Well, and then I love that line.
They said you was hung.
And Sheriff Bart responds says,
And they was right.
I love that. That is such
it's a perfect play on the word, because the correct terminology is you were hanged.
Right.
But all the times people will say, if they don't know the grammar, they'll say you were hung. But obviously the double entendre.
Right.
Well, and as an 8-year-old, I didn't get that. But
no, I didn't either.
Nobody. I mean, but the adult is once again, it like flew right over the top of the head of the kids and hit the parent right in the face and went, that's funny.
But
and also
I can tell you,
unfortunately, it reinforces the stereotype of,
yes,
black men. Right. So it's a combo.
I remember
say,
when
unfortunately, most black guys I know are like, no, I'll keep that one. That's fine.
No,
nothing unfortunate there.
It can be perceived as lazy writing about doing that cliche. That's what I meant.
All we have to remember is Lily von Stoop did say it's true.
Well, it's true.
And to me, the one of the funniest things about this is such a guy joke.
Well, yeah, it is a guy joke.
Every one of us would be like, oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, it is such a good, but also I remember exactly when I understood this joke, because I was watching it with some buddies of mine in high school, and he said that, and it was one of the times in my life when I've actually spewed a drink, because I was taking a drink of Coke. It went through my nose. It went everywhere, because I don't know if it was like the first time in a while I'd heard that line or if it just caught me. But I remember spewing Coke all over the place when I heard that.
I do remember when I finally started to understand some of the deeper jokes or some of the context jokes. Yeah, as a kid, when I was 9 or 10, I did not get they said you was hung and they was right. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, right. Went totally past
Yeah, let's keep watching the movie.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that whole joke when two guys are at the urinal, like, man, this water's cold. Like, yeah, and deep too.
And deep too, right? Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're sporting the peewee, you're still going to say it.
Right.
It's a guy thing.
I use that line completely out of context and in absurd ways, because nobody ever believes that I've been hung or anything like that. But I do. If somebody says something that's obvious, I go, and they were right. That's like so I use that because there's so many quotable parts of Blazing Saddles that you can put into real life, and I do that once again. I'm not testing the person, but the right people get it. I just go, give them the eye. Yeah, you get that. Blazing Saddles, right? Mm-hmm. And then move on.
Well, and I think one of the places in pop culture where a line similar to this really took hold was from The Office, when Michael Scott used to say, "That's what she said." And it's kind of that same thing of you can throw that hook into just about anything anybody says and throw that in there, and it's funny. And so it's kind of a similar hook here that he uses.
Before I go to the script, because I always like to point out where we've got some changes, things that, and you're going to find again, Walt, I think agreeing we didn't need it and it needed to be dropped. One thing I want to point out with this scene, and this minute in particular, this is as close to being a real Western in this minute. The music is Western. You've got the harmonica playing the theme to Blazing Saddles. You've got the railroad workers. There's no real joke even until they said you was hung and they was right.
You've also got the scenery shots.
Everything looks beautiful.
Right, yeah.
This is that moment where if you had stumbled into the room and you said, oh, you're just watching a Western and walked out, you would not have known it's a comedy. You would not really know this is a Mel Brooks movie even. Mm-hmm. And I love it. I love the fact that we had this gifted cinematographer, Joseph Barak, who was able to frame these shots and continue to capture a Western motif throughout the satire that is Blazing Saddles.
Off the top of your head, do you know where this scene was shot? Because it kind of reminds me of a lot of the old school Westerns that were filmed in Star Trek episodes and things like that.
Funny you bring up Star Trek, the Vasquez Rocks, which...
Vasquez Rocks, yes, yeah. Exactly.
So that's not too far from you, closer to you than it is to us.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, you're only, maybe a 200 or 300 mile drive down there?
I've driven past them on Highway 5 like maybe 30 years ago or something like that, where I just kind of saw them in the distance. And I was nerdy, but I wasn't so nerdy that I needed to take a detour and go see where the Kirk and the Gorn were fighting. But
It's funny you say that.
Funny you should say that.
30 years ago, I would have been like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Now I'd be like, oh, I have to stop.
What are you talking about? 2 years ago, we know our radio friend BK spent an entire vacation planning to go to
the man had never hiked in his life before that, and he started hiking so
just
that he
to be
could
prepared.
do this.
No, I'm not saying that I wouldn't do it now. I'm saying I didn't do it then. When I went to Death Valley, I found all the different places where Star Wars was shot. And when I went to England on my first trip, I made sure it's like, oh, this is the castle where Monty Python and Holy Grail. It's like, oh, so I'm planning my next England trip. I'm trying to figure out, okay, what weird, goofy, nerdy things can I go and visit? So yeah, now I'm doing it. Now, then I was like, I just didn't have time.
This is where I'll let you know my bucket list of if I had to go on like the movie set tour. And I will need about 3 weeks because I want 3 weeks anyway, I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. And to do the
New Zealand.
Middle-earth New Zealand tour of all the filming locations, I think some people go like, you would go to New Zealand and you're going to see so much of New Zealand if you go to all the places they filmed. It would be so worth it.
It's a tiny little island. It is so small. You probably do it no problem in 3 weeks.
And isn't that amazing about Lord of the Rings? They chose, obviously, because that's where Peter Jackson's from and he knows the area. But to have that wide-ranging environmental shots to create this sense of an entire world, it's just breathtaking.
Well, that's once again, it's good filmmaking. It's taking the surroundings. Like when I was watching the millions and millions of times I've watched Blazing Saddles, I know I'm exaggerating, but I never really looked in the background. Since we're doing this minute by minute, I was looking in the background. It's like, okay, what can we talk about the background? Whereas every other time it's just like, oh, it's out, it's west, it's the West. That's all I ever looked at it for. So now that we're these hyper aware people with how we watch movies, sometimes it takes me out of the movie to be paying attention to what's going on. But once again, watch this.
One of the things we love about doing the movies by minutes, and this is maybe repeating something as well, we were worried, do we ruin a movie by looking at it too closely? And so far that hasn't, knock on wood, been the case. We've actually enjoyed it even more, even when we find the occasional flaws.
Yeah, that's what's happening to me today.
And I've even found as a listener to several podcasts, it makes me appreciate the movies even more, even when you find weaknesses in it. I'm like, but it helps me understand scenes better. It kind of helps me, like for that, when understanding what is going through Rocky's head. And then as a fan too, hearing other fans talk about it and go, yeah, I thought that same thing. Why did he do that? Or why did Sheriff Bart do this? So for me, it makes it even more fun doing these deep dives and not doing it in, like I had to in college where I had 2 or 3 film classes. And I was like, oh, we got to sit down and look at hair. Maybe I've got pneumonia that week.
Hair.
The musical? The movie?
Of all the things you could pull.
I know.
Oh, wow. I thought you meant like a scene where there's a close-up on hair.
Close-up on hair.
What do you mean?
No, I think we really pissed Dr. Simcoe off, and so he's like, fine, we're going through hair.
Some people like that musical.
Yeah, I know some people do.
Oh, wait a minute. I would do Hair Minute. And no problem.
You're laughing.
I would love Hair Minute.
No, I know. But you know how I feel about musicals.
I know.
I suffer through them.
Your idea of people choreograph randomly advancing the story through song and dance.
Right. Okay, let me go to another one that we had to do. The Maltese Falcon.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yes. Exactly.
I love the Maltese Falcon. Do you not?
That's a brutal film to break down, though.
But it's also, it was really hard to get through.
It was hard.
Really, really hard to get through. That movie, I know it's AFI, I know it's heralded, but it's just like, whew. This was in my 40s. This isn't like I gave it a shot when I was young and didn't care. It's just like, I don't. Nah.
So I watched it probably when I was 20 and suffered through it then. And then I've tried to watch it since then, just thinking, I was 20. I was really dumb. I really didn't appreciate things the way I do. And I watch it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do it.
Okay, well, let me ask this then, because I felt like this the first time I saw Casablanca, only because I didn't see it for so many years, and everybody kept telling me it's one of the best movies ever made. So I had such a high bar set in my head that the first time I watched it, it didn't measure up to what I thought it was supposed to be. I've gone back since then. I'm like, okay, I get in its time.
Right.
And I understand why this movie is so revered to so many people. But you got to be careful. Sometimes movies can be so overblown before you even see it, you end up not liking it, almost like kind of as a negative reaction to it.
I just think the Maltese Falcon was just not that good.
All right.
Well, cool statue. Cool statue.
Yeah, cool statue.
Cool statue.
But I think 12 Angry Men, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, I knew like the hype for that movie was incredible. So I was like, yeah, I'm probably not going to like it as much as everybody says. But every time I've watched it since then, I'm like, I love this movie. It's a great.
And they talk about the classic black and white one with Henry Fonda?
Yes.
If you haven't, I know we mentioned it in Young Frankenstein. If you get a chance, it was an HBO-made movie, the updated one that had George C. Scott and Jack Lemmon. It's
who are both fantastic actors.
Every bit as good. They updated it just a little bit to explain, rather than being a black kid, the kid's actually Mexican, and the racist, rather than being a white guy, is actually a black guy.
Oh.
So they put a different spin on it, but it's still basically the same thing. And George C. Scott and Jack Lemmon, I mean, I'd watch them in anything.
Yeah, right. I think they can.
So that's
they can
really
even be in the
made for
Maltese
TV
Falcon
movie, or was
it was a
HBO.
It was made for HBO, and it was released.
Right,
and
right.
you can get it
Yeah,
now.
I do remember that.
It's on
Yeah,
DVD.
yeah.
You can probably find it somewhere or stream it.
Sure,
but it's so good. That you know why it's so good though? It was originally as a play, so it had to have great writing. Because you don't get to go do car chases and explosions on stage.
Right. No, I mean the whole thing is set in one room.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, let's get back to then the Blazing Saddles here.
Yeah, we are in the weeds right now.
Well, that's fine because I wanted to talk about the script because we were talking about the film and the filming and how it felt really, really good. There's supposed to be some additional lines here. You can hear, I'm going to read this, and then you'll hear where some are just massaged a little, and then you'll realize exactly where it goes off the rails. Because right after, they said you was hung, Bart says, and they was right. Bart and Charlie embrace. Then Charlie says, hey, baby bro, where'd you get that star? You win it in the claw machine? Bart, back off, scamp. You're addressing the duly appointed Sheriff of Rockridge. Charlie, Sheriff of Rockridge? Well, don't that hump the pump. That's where the railroad is going, Rockridge. Bart and Jim look at each other. Charlie, who's that? Bart, oh, that's just Jim. He's my friend. He's cool. And then all the guys come over, which we see at the end of this minute. So only a couple of things remain, but I'm kind of glad they not only shortened it, this whole thing, hey, baby bro, and did you get that in the claw machine? It just, too much 70s lingo.
He does call him baby bro somewhere in the movie, but I can't. Maybe it's here.
Does he say it here? I didn't hear it.
I can't remember if it's here or not, but there's somewhere in the movie he calls him baby bro. But
he says, get your hands off my brother, later to the guys.
Right.
Yeah.
It might slip out, but once again, this goes back to his natural acting that he might have just been improvising all over, and it just came out really quick. But it does sound familiar. The baby bro does sound familiar, but it's not. Of course, it's you reading it, baby bro. That sounds terrible, but he might say baby bro. It might be real quick. Yeah, it might just kind of.
And
slip past
maybe
us.
I'm missing it, but
it was. Once again, I think they let him loose and said, just be natural. Just, react like you would react. And it works.
Get that off. What's happening? Yeah, man. Yeah, what's going on, big dude? Oh, you shifting. They said you was hung. And they was right. Ooh, look at that star. Ooh, wee. Civil service. All right, yeah. Oh, baby. Wait, back off, scamp. You are addressing the duly appointed Sheriff of Rockridge.
And I also like they don't need to explain who's the white dude on the horse with you. I think that would have almost lessens the message of the movie by like all of a sudden now you distrust the white guy. It's like, hey, he's with Bart. Right. Why would I distrust him?
Right.
I like that they don't have any call out to Jim. Oh, he's cool. He's with me. It just didn't work for me. So we do get to the very end of the minute here, and we see that as these two guys are rekindling their friendship, and we get a little plot point about, and Charlie does deliver it about
Rockridge. Hey, the railroad's going through there.
I love the little knowing look from Cleavon Little over to Gene Wilder. Now the problem is, Gene Wilder is off to Cleavon Little's left shoulder.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. But when Cleavon Little makes the knowing nod, he goes off to his right. He's looking completely opposite of where the Waco Kid is in relation to where he is.
Yeah, that is a.
I mean, in
That's
our
the problem
minds,
with being hypersensitive to continuity is sometimes you just go, okay, I'll let that go.
this
Which
just happens to be one of my forte. My wife hates it because she goes, "You ruin every movie by pointing this crap out to me. Would you just watch the movie and shut up?" But
Yeah, I usually keep it to myself too.
I noticed this only because I'm thinking of eye lines and things like that. It works in most people's minds. Even you probably well. You didn't notice that either.
I
Did
didn't
you?
catch that one.
Because we sense
I didn't catch it.
We sense that he's looking off to his right, and then all of a sudden we zoom in to Bart or to Jim, who's making kind of like a In our minds, we just fill in they must look at each other, but there's no way based on where they're standing that they could have actually looked each other in the eye.
But if he had actually made the move to look at him, it wouldn't have been subtle, because he's not in a position where it would have been a subtle look. He would have had to have very intentionally turned all the way around to make eye contact to do that.
I don't think so, because the framing, his face was pretty much almost flat in the screen. It's like two-dimensional. We've got Charlie's three-dimensional coming sort of the backside of his head. This is your typical, what you would call like a dirty shot where he's actually in the frame with our main character.
Uh-huh.
And so he could have very easily just looked off to his left. I just think Mel Brooks just decided, either look off to one side, or maybe they lost track of where he was looking. Maybe at one point in time, Gene Wilder was over there during one of the takes and just off screen, but it didn't match in the edit for some reason, or didn't match. I shouldn't say that this was the better take. And even if he doesn't look in the right direction, you chose the better take.
I agree with you
versus
there.
continuity.
I think that they just took the best take in that. And he probably just said glance off screen, not really thinking that anybody was going to catch.
Well, it happens so fast. If you don't slow it down, I like pointing these things out for our audience. If they don't believe me, you can go back and go to the very end of the minute here, and you'll be able to see that he's looking off to his right, and Gene Wilder's off to his left.
Yeah.
He probably just noticed the Gorn and Kirk fighting.
he saw Kirk. So you got your shirt off again.
Yeah, that's probably what it was. They were filming it. Oh, no, that was in 1966. So, yeah, probably not.
No,
probably
not quite. Well, with Mel Brooks, he kind of plays fast and loose with time, and things are anachronistic. Maybe it works. We do end, and I do like this. They do just the subtle. Jim and Bart do exchange the look. Bart, sort of looks up. We talked about it. Jim responds for just a hair. And then I love all of a sudden everybody realizes Bart's here. And sudden jubilation of all these guys dropping their tools, knowing they're going to probably get in trouble for napping or slacking on the job, but they're all coming to greet Bart. That just goes to show instantly the kind of this group, this sort of the family almost. Like these guys are more than just workers. These guys are all they're like family.
Yeah, very clear. Very nice.
Well, and you kind of have to think that all these guys have left what was familiar to them on the East Coast, on the plantations and stuff, and gone west. And they've now been together a long time because they've been laying this track progressively west. So it does become almost a family.
Well, it's sort of like that whole thing, but whenever you go through crises with people together, there's some kind of a bond that forms there, the whole band of brothers idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, well, as we then wrap up this minute for a Friday, we got to save some things for Monday. We're going to have Gordy join us again. Gordy, you've been our guest, so we'll let you go first. When you looked at this minute and we're getting ready to come on the Wilder ride, were there any other items that we need to talk about that we might have missed?
Not really. It's tough because I know the movie so well, and I want to talk about the last hour before this, but that would be a very, very long show. So, it just, once again, I can watch this movie over and over again and never hit pause. It's always a great, great thing. There's not a lot of movies that are like that. There's Star Wars, there's Princess Bride, there's Blazing Saddles, there's Young Frankenstein. There's a lot of it. I only wish that there was a little bit more Gene Wilder in this, because this is the Wilder ride. But, just jumped in where I was needed.
Well, I appreciate you being. Well, what is it for folks who don't know what you do as a day job as a mail carrier? I mean, what is the phrase? Rain or sleet or snow or dark of night. I mean, you're going to come through in a pinch.
That's right. Yeah, sure.
Walt, anything in your notes?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it.
All right. Well, Gordy, let me give you a chance to sort of pitch a couple of things. You did have a podcast, and I'm assuming the episodes are still out there. You haven't had recent ones lately, but you've also been a guest on some of these Movies by Minutes. Why don't you let folks know where they can learn a little bit more about you?
Well, okay, there's a couple things. Instagram, I have a kind of a branding thing that I do where I have photos of different things that happen on my route. Somewhere in the background is my mail truck, or it's like proof that it's, I'm actually delivering the mail. I'm a mailman in St. Helena, California, which is the Napa Valley where the wine is made. It's a little north of San Francisco by about an hour. And it's a very, very small town. And a lot of interesting things happen on my route, and I take pictures. And recently, unfortunately, there was a cat that every day would come out and greet me, Amici, for the last 10 years. And he finally went off to another planet and we had a little palliative care and hospice, and now he's gone. So he was the very first picture I ever put. It's like Amici greeting me. And then, so that's kind of a fun thing that I do. I don't do anything consistently other than work. I work 6 days a week a lot of the time. So that's my most consistent thing. But I've had the Gordcast, which was a podcast I've had for a long, long time. And all those episodes should be available. And if you like music and you just like a couple of guys talking, I do have guests. I've actually had semi-famous people on it. Tom Beeland, who's a comic book writer, an artist, is a good friend, and I've had him a few times. And then I've guested on the Indiana Jones Minute, which we need to thank. Once again, all these minute-by-minute guys need a great big round of applause. And then recently I just did another Facebook friend, That's Cool, That's Trash. And it's guys talking about really, really bad movies. And we just did one called The Wild Wild West, which is it's a Filipino movie that takes place in Mexico in the 18th century, dubbed in English, and it's as bad as you think. But it's wonderful and fun to talk. You talk for an hour and a half about a movie that you should have even watched in the first place. That's gold.
Comedy gold.
Comedy gold.
Fantastic. Well, folks, I would definitely encourage you to follow the Instagram. It's really, really cool to get the images every day. I know we follow you as well. Are you on Twitter?
I am on Twitter. It's probably the same, Gordy Mailman with 2 A's. I rarely do anything with Twitter. It's just not my. It just doesn't work.
Gotcha.
I just don't do it as much as most people.
Okay.
But mostly Facebook, and I'll friend anybody on Facebook. It's fine. If we're all into the same thing, you'll totally get my feed.
Awesome. Walt, it is Friday. It's the end of the week, and I think Gordy brought up a good point. There are a lot of folks out here doing what we're doing on podcasts. Where can people go if they want to, let's say, I don't know, rate your podcast or maybe comment or share? What do you suggest to our listeners?
There are a couple places that you can go for that. Wherever you're listening, whether that be on the purple podcast icon on iTunes, or on
we call that Apple Podcasts now.
Yeah, whatever that is this week.
Still technically iTunes in the background, but Apple Podcasts. All right, let's just make things harder.
Apple Podcatcher, whatever it's named this week. Stitcher, Himalaya, wherever you're listening to us. And if you could just leave a comment and give us a 5-star rating, that would be really helpful. It pushes us up the list, so people searching for Gene Wilder or Blazing Saddles or whatever will be able to find us a lot easier.
And by the way, that goes for all the podcasts you listen to. We're all in the same boat. We could all use more ratings, more love from you, the listener. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, just take a few seconds and whatever you're listening to, Indiana Jones, Rocky, the Gordcast, whatever you happen to be listening to, or maybe even the Wilder Ride. We'd appreciate it. So come on back Monday. We'll give you a little tease for over the weekend, because this conversation is going to continue. Obviously, we saw all of the guys breaking loose from their daily labor to come over and greet Bart. So we will continue on Monday with the crowd all greeting Bart and Charlie having to sort of tell the crowd to back off. And we're going to end with Taggart. Yes, Taggart comes back on horseback saying, "Here we take the good time and trouble to slaughter every last Indian in the West. And for what?"
And for what?
So come on back Monday to learn a little bit more about that as we get to minute number 66 of this, The Wilder Ride.
Well, they said I was hung.
They was lying.
You were more than right.
Look, it's cold, okay? It's not my fault.
What is it George Costanza said?
What?
I was
Shrinkage!
Shrinkage! Shrinkage, I swear to God. Give me a second. Hold on. What are you doing? Never mind.
Just like when I listen to you guys talk, you go off in different tangents, and it's just like, okay, back to the movie. That's just those are my favorite conversations because it spurs memories and ideas and all sorts of different things.
Walt usually takes the lead on that because that's how his brain works. So
yeah. I'll follow along. I'm familiar enough with your podcast that I kind of know. I don't know every single inside joke between you guys, but
we don't either.
No, we don't either. I'm Alan Sanders here on our show that deals with the films of Blazing Saddles. Jesus Christ. I can't even do my own intro. Let's try that again. Take 2.
Good start. This is exactly how we work, Gordy. We suck.
Yeah. I know what behind the scenes is like. I've been doing this for a long time.
We pre-plan our outtakes. Let's try that again. And...
So it gets pushed up the list there.
You're going to have to repeat that because a train came through. I was trying to get you to end, go fast.
Yeah, I was trying to go fast.
Hold on. We actually have the Rock Ridge Rail is rolling right through right now.
And oddly not destroying the town.
No.
We have a Rock Ridge station in Oakland for the BART, which is like the Bay Area's subway. Is Rock Ridge.
Depending how close you are to catching up to where we are in the releases, we actually mentioned in a couple episodes where all the Rock Ridges are, and we talked about the one in Oakland.
There you go.